Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'll be talking about JavaScript promises and the sync await and this keyword. So I've gone through this playlist by Akshay Saini today, and it is a wonderful playlist and it dives deep into async await promises and all the asynchronous thing in JavaScript. So if you want, you could go through this. What I would be doing in this video is I have imported the videos links in the notebook LM, and I have generated a quiz on that particular material. So I'll be solving that quiz in this video. So before that, what we can do is I have also generated a slide deck and an infographic of those particular videos. So we can go through the slide deck once because it looked really nice to me when I saw it. So let me just open it. I hope it is being recorded. Yeah. So this would just be a recap of those 6 to 8 videos. Okay. So basically, uh, here we are mainly concerned about the asynchronous functioning, how async works in JavaScript. So now initially we talk about the callback hell. So basically, let's say if we have some dependencies, let's say we can only call the proceed to payment function once the create order is successful. Okay. And we can only call show order summary once the proceed to payment is successful. So here we have some dependencies and these functions are callbacks to another function. So what happens is our code grows horizontally, okay, and it looks really unmaintainable, okay, and also our code depends on a lot of external dependencies, and that is not good for us as engineers. So that dependency, okay, that is basically called inversion of control because the control is no longer with the engineer, okay, and we would have to trust some third party APIs that they would ultimately execute our code, okay, as a callback. So this was the issue with the callbacks. There was no guarantee of execution. Now after that, to solve that problem, we got promises. So promise is basically an object, okay, and that object basically represents eventual completion of an operation. Okay, now that completion might be successful, it might be a failure, but it would represent whatever the eventual completion, whatever the eventual result was of that asynchronous operation. Okay, so that is what a promise is. Again, I'm not going into too much detail. This would serve as a recap if you have gone through those videos or if you are already aware of promises, callbacks, and all of that stuff. Okay, so this is how a promise object looks. It has a promise result and it has a promise state. So the promise state can either be pending or rejected or fulfilled. Okay, and with promise, our callback hell issue is solved. Okay, our code no longer grows horizontally, and yeah, we can also chain promise to manage those dependency which we were getting earlier. So this is how we can manage. We can use .then, .catch, and then we have some promises API. So this is a really nice matrix which the notebook LM has created for me. So if you want, you can either take a screenshot or you could also generate a matrix of your own. And then we have async await. So async await is nothing but a syntactic sugar over the promises then catch thing. Okay, and also they are easier to understand as an engineer, or let's say as someone reading the code. The async await makes much more sense. Okay, so yeah, and in one of the videos, Akshay also talks about the this keyword, and it is a great video, so you can watch that video. So basically, this basically points to different objects or refers to different stuff based on what space the this is, or based on how this is called. Okay. uh yeah, we don't have to dive deep into it. Let's jump into our quiz. Okay, that would be better. So this is the quiz which we have generated. So let's start solving this quiz. Okay, in the context of asynchronous JavaScript, what is the primary structural consequence of callback hell? The code grows horizontally rather than vertically, forming a pyramid of doom. Which issue best describes the inversion of control problem associated with using callbacks for asynchronous operations? Yes, this the execution of the callback is blindly entrusted to another part of the code, such as an external API. According to the formal technical definition often used in documentation, what is a promise? So promise is an object representing the eventual completion of an asynchronous operation. What occurs when the JavaScript engine executes a line of code calling an asynchronous API like fetch before the data is actually returned? The engine waits? No, the engine doesn't wait. It returns a promise object immediately, initially in a pending state. So this is what happens. What is the primary benefit of promise chaining compared to nested callbacks? Primary benefit of promise chaining. Okay, it keeps the code structure vertical and more readable. Correct. When creating a new promise using the new promise constructor, what are the two parameters provided? The two parameters provided are resolve and reject. In a promise chain, what is the consequence of forgetting to use the return keyword when initiating a subsequent asynchronous operation within a then block? Yeah, so if we don't return from any of the functions in a promise chain, the data from that particular operation is not passed down in the pipe in the chain. Okay, so that is the issue. How does promise.all settled fundamentally differ from promise.all? So promise.all settled waits for every promise to either fulfill or reject before returning a collective result. Okay, which promise API would be most appropriate for implementing a fail fast strategy where you need all parallel tasks to succeed? So fail fast would be promise.all, I think. Yeah. If promise.any is called with an array of promises and every single promise in that array is rejected, it will throw an aggregate error. Okay. What is a mandatory characteristic of any function declared with the async keyword? Mandatory characteristic of any function declared with the async keyword. It must contain at least once. No. So for async keyword, basically it always returns a promise, and even if a non-promise value is returned, it would wrap that inside a promise and return. When an async function encounters an await keyword for a promise that has not yet settled, what happens to the function's execution in the call stack? The JavaScript thread creates a new thread? No. The function's execution is suspended and it is removed from the call stack. This is what happens. Consider an async function containing two sequential await statements, await p1 and await p2. Okay, so this is directly from one of the code examples which was present in the video. How much time passes before the line after the second await is executed? 10 seconds total. Yeah. So I won't explain this. This is present in the video. Okay, they're the same example. What is the primary method for handling rejections within an async await function block? Try catch. So whenever you have async await blocks, it's much better to use a try catch. So wrap the awaited call inside a try catch block. In the global execution context of a web browser, this refers to the window object. Okay. What happens to the value of this inside a standard function it is undefined. In strict mode, it is undefined. Okay. What is this substitution? This substitution basically means that in non-strict mode, the null or undefined value of this is replaced with the global object. In the following code snippet, what will be logged if called as object.print? Okay, so we have an object and we are okay, basically what would this have? Okay, so here we are calling this function, basically print is a method. Okay, so we are calling it an object, so this should point to the object itself. So when a function is called as a method, this refers to the object before the dot. What is the primary difference between how this is determined in a standard function versus an arrow function? Arrow functions don't have their this binding, okay, so they get it from the enclosing lexical context. If an arrow function is defined directly inside an object's property, what will its this value refer to? If an arrow function is defined directly inside an object's property, so this value would refer to the global object. Yeah, so I mean, they have not framed the question perfectly. It is directly from one of the coding examples, so I was able to solve it. What does this represent when used with an on click? So inside this, it would be the specific HTML element that was clicked. How does the call method allow you to manipulate the this keyword? How does the call method allow you to manipulate the this keyword? Okay. So it allows you to explicitly set the value of this for a function call by passing it as the first argument. Which of the following best practices the pyramid of doom best describes the pyramid of doom in JavaScript? The unreadable nested structure of multiple callbacks is called pyramid of doom. What is the state returned by a promise during the time the network request is still in transit? It would be pending. If an async function is designed to return a string hello, what will a synchronous caller see if they log the result of the function call directly? Uh, okay, so async function basically returns a promise, so they would see the promise, I would say. In the call stack, why does JavaScript appear to wait at an await line without freezing the entire browser UI? Because the function's context is removed during suspension. That is why. What specific error does promise.race return if the very first promise to settle happens to be rejection? Promise.race. Okay. Promise.race does not return an aggregate error. Promise.race gives us the first resolved or rejected, I think any of the first settled promise. Yeah, so it returns a rejection of that first settled promise. Yeah, correct. Which of the following best explains why promises are considered immutable once settled? Okay, physically logged in the computer's RAM, value cannot be altered by any other code, and that is why it is immutable. So yeah, I was able to solve all the questions. It serves as a good recap. I think that will be it for this video. Thank you for watching.